After years of funding my parents' retirement, they said, "Your sister deserves it more, she gave us grandkids." I froze their accounts that night. A month later, Mom texted me from a shelter. I responded, "Ask your favorite daughter to help." I've never been good at saying no to my family. Not really. Especially not to my parents. For years, I thought of myself as the responsible one. That was my whole identity. Mara, the one who got out. Mara, the one who made good money. Mara, the one who didn't cause problems. I grew up in Spokane, Washington, the older of two daughters. My sister Daphne was the soft one, always crying about something, always being rescued. I was the opposite, quiet, observant, and constantly figuring things out for myself. My parents, Howard and Judith, were never outright abusive. But they weren't warm either. Affection was transactional. Praise came with a but. Love always felt like something I had to earn. I left Spokane at 18 on a partial scholarship to CU Boulder and never really looked back. I stayed in Colorado after graduation, eventually building a career in tech. I was proud of my work, my independence, my condo, and my modest but stable savings. I didn't have a husband or kids, but that had always been a conscious choice. I liked my space. My peace. When Dad injured his back in his early 60s and had to stop working construction, things got tight for them. I stepped in almost instinctively. At first, it was a couple $100s to help with bills. Then groceries. Then rent. It became routine. Eventually, I was sending $1,500 a month without question. They never asked for more, but they never said thank you, either. It just became expected. They told me it was what family does. They told me I was being a good daughter. I believed them. For a long time, I didn't notice how Daphne kept coming up more and more in conversations. Little comments here and there. At first, I thought they were just excited about the kids. Daphne had 3 in quick succession and stayed home with them. Cole, her husband, bounced between low-paying jobs and side hustles. They were always tight on money. "She's a wonderful mother," Mom would say. "It's a lot, but she manages. She made us grandparents," Dad once told me, as if that alone were worth sainthood. Every holiday I didn't attend became a passive-aggressive guilt trip. Every choice I made that didn't mirror Daphne's was some sign of selfishness or distance. I let it slide. Until last Thanksgiving. I hadn't seen them in person for over a year. I decided to fly up to Spokane and surprise them. I brought gifts, and I cooked dinner. I wanted it to feel like family again. But that warmth never really came. They were cordial, but distracted. Daphne and the kids were over constantly that week. Her youngest, just 3, ran through the house screaming. Cole borrowed my car without asking. Twice. One evening, after the kids were finally down for the night and the adults were watching TV, I went into the hallway to grab my phone off the charger. That's when I overheard them talking in the kitchen. "She'll be mad," Dad whispered. "She'll understand," Mom replied. "Daphne needs help. She's doing so much, and Mara's always working. She won't miss it." "You sure we shouldn't have told her?" he asked. "She has no one else. She doesn't even have kids. That money's not going to change her life." My heart dropped. When I confronted them, I kept my voice low. "You've been giving Daphne money? Out of what I send you?" They didn't deny it. In fact, Mom looked right at me and said, "She gave us grandchildren. She deserves it more." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I nodded. I told them I was tired and went to bed early. The next morning, I got on an earlier flight home and didn't tell anyone. By the time I landed back in Boulder, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to play the responsible fool anymore. I called the bank and froze the shared account I'd opened to manage their bills. I cut off the auto payments and sent an email outlining the dates and amounts I had given over the years. It wasn't a threat, it was documentation. In case they came after me legally, which I doubted, but didn't rule out. Then, silence. I didn't hear from them for 3 weeks. Then the voicemails started. First confused, then panicked. Mara, the gas is shut off. We can't get groceries. Your father missed his doctor's appointment. Then came the guilt. I don't know what we did to deserve this. I thought we were family. Please call us. I didn't respond. A month later, a text came through from a number I didn't recognize. Mara. It's Mom. We're at a shelter. We lost the house. Please help us. I stared at it for a long time. I typed, slowly and deliberately. Ask your favorite daughter to help. And I blocked the number. That was January. Since then, I've heard through my cousin Maribel that they bounced around a few shelters before landing a spot in low-income senior housing. Daphne couldn't take them in, Cole said there was no space, and besides, he wasn't running a nursing home. No one seems to blame her. Not even Mom and Dad. Maribel asked if I wanted to come to a family barbecue in the spring. I said no. I didn't explain. I didn't owe anyone anything. I wish I could say I felt bad. But I don't. Not really. For years, I gave and gave. They took and gave my help to someone else, someone who gave them what they really wanted. Grandkids. A legacy. A traditional story they could tell their friends at church. What they didn't want was me, the quiet daughter who never needed saving, who never gave them drama, but also never gave them something to show off. I've been learning, painfully, that love doesn't mean sacrificing yourself to be tolerated. Sometimes, respect is more important than blood. And that family? Family is who doesn't make you beg for the bare minimum. I kept mostly to myself after that. In the silence that followed, I realized how much of my mental bandwidth had been consumed by guilt, obligation, and this invisible weight of being the good one. Once I dropped the act, I started noticing space opening up inside me, quiet space. It was uncomfortable at first. Like learning how to sit still after running for years. I started therapy again. I'd seen a therapist off and on throughout my adult life, but this time felt different. I wasn't going to talk about work stress or relationships. I wanted to understand why I kept setting myself on fire to keep others warm. Why didn't I see it sooner? I asked my therapist during our second session. She smiled gently and said, because you were surviving. You weren't safe enough yet to see it. That hit me like a brick. She was right. I started journaling again. Every morning, I wrote down just a few things, what I was grateful for, what I was angry about, and what I had done for myself that day. It was awkward at first, but over time, patterns emerged. I realized how often I wrote, I didn't answer the phone, or I said no. And those small declarations felt enormous. Meanwhile, my cousin Maribel kept me loosely updated on what was happening back in Spokane. Apparently, my parents were trying to apply for some kind of government assistance, but it was slow going. Their pride had taken a hit, Mom, especially. She's been telling everyone you cut them off out of nowhere, Maribel said once during a phone call. I snorted. Out of nowhere? After almost a decade of financial support? Maribel was quiet for a second. I know. I told her that. She said you changed. She wasn't wrong. I had changed. I just wasn't sorry for it. One night in late February, I got a friend request on Facebook, from Daphne. I hadn't spoken to her directly since the Thanksgiving trip. Even then, our relationship had always been strained. She was the baby, the favorite, the one who cried during arguments so people would stop yelling. I was the one who walked out of the room and closed the door behind me. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. I accepted the request. An hour later, she messaged me. You're really gonna let them end up on the street? After everything? No hello. No, how are you? Just straight to the point. I stared at the message, letting my fingers hover over the keyboard. I typed, I already did more than anyone else in this family. 4 years. She replied almost instantly. You have money. You don't have a family. What else are you gonna spend it on? That one stung more than I thought it would. I didn't respond. I blocked her the next morning. That was the last straw for me, emotionally. After that, I deleted Facebook entirely. I stopped checking in with Maribel, stopped monitoring the family drama. I was done. And not in the dramatic, stomp out of the room kind of way. In the final, silent, liberating kind of way. In March, I started doing things I hadn't let myself enjoy before. I took a watercolor class at a community center. I got into hiking again. I went to a local trivia night by myself and ended up chatting with a group of strangers who later became casual friends. I even started dating a little, nothing serious, but it felt good to flirt again, to remember that I could. One of them, Levi, was especially kind. He wasn't flashy or conventionally attractive, but he listened in a way that made me feel heard instead of examined. On our third date, we talked about families. He told me he had always been distant, a little cold. I told him mine had always been conditional. He didn't flinch. He just nodded and said, sometimes walking away is the only way to stop the bleeding. He got it. Every once in a while, usually when I'm doing something mundane like folding laundry or cooking pasta, a wave of guilt creeps in. Not loud. Just a whisper. What if something happens to them? What if mom falls? What if dad needs surgery? But I remind myself, I didn't cause this. I didn't abandon them. They made choices. They gambled with my love and assumed I wouldn't walk away. They bet everything on Daphne, and lost. The most twisted part? If they had just asked, I probably would have helped. If they'd come to me and said, hey, Daphne's in trouble. Can we give her some of what you give us? I would have said yes. Maybe not forever. Maybe not $500 a month. But something. Instead, they lied. They were manipulated. They told themselves I wouldn't miss it because I didn't have a husband or children. As if my life, on its own, wasn't reason enough to be respected. I didn't know what to call what I was going through. Grief? Relief? Some strange cocktail of both? There were mornings when I woke up feeling lighter than I ever had, no texts, no guilt trips, no quiet judgment tucked into holiday phone calls. Other mornings, the silence felt like a fog I couldn't quite shake off. Like something should be happening, but wasn't. That's the tricky thing about cutting toxic family ties, it doesn't end with a triumphant bang. It's just quiet. I went back through old emails and bank statements one night, trying to calculate just how much I'd given over the years. I stopped around the $140,000 mark. That number made me pause. It wasn't just about the money. It was about what I gave up to make that money, time, relationships, sleep, peace. And how quickly it was handed off to someone else with no acknowledgement. I had a spreadsheet I kept, part budget, part therapy. One column showed how much I sent my parents each month. Another column tracked irregular expenses I'd covered. Debt bills when their cat got sick. Repairs on their old car. A new refrigerator when the old one broke. I'd saved the receipts. I stared at that spreadsheet for over an hour. At the bottom, I typed one last row, final payment, dignity. Then I closed it. I haven't opened it since. Around mid-April, Maribel called me out of the blue. I debated letting it go to voicemail but picked up on instinct. Hey, she said, cautiously. Sorry to bother you. I just thought you should know, Judith ended up in the ER. High blood pressure, dehydration. Nothing super serious, but. I stayed silent. She asked for you. That caught me off guard. Why? I finally asked. She didn't say. But she kept saying your name. A lot. I thanked her for letting me know and hung up. I didn't call the hospital. I didn't text. I sat on my couch with a mug of tea growing cold in my hands and tried to feel something. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to feel triumphant, even. But what I felt most was tired. I've spent most of my adult life trying to earn something that was never coming. Not real love. Not mutual respect. Just conditional loyalty that expired the second I stopped being useful. I didn't visit her. I didn't call the next day to see if she was discharged. But I did go on a long walk that evening. Through the foothills, past the trailhead that always calms me. I looked up at the mountains and said, quietly, I forgive you. But that doesn't mean I have to come back. And that was the truth. In early May, I bumped into Daphne at a grocery store in Spokane. I had flown in for Maribel's baby shower, against my better judgment. I kept it short, an overnight trip, a neutral hotel, no extra visits. But there she was in the produce aisle, holding a toddler on her hip and trying to keep an older kid from knocking over a banana stand. We locked eyes. She looked tired. She looked surprised. But she didn't look sorry. She gave me a once-over and said, "So you do come back?" "I came for Maribel," I said. She rolled her eyes. "Of course." There was a pause. Just the hum of store lights and soft pop music overhead. "You know they've had it rough, right?" she asked, not looking at me. "I know," I replied. "And you're okay with that?" "No," I said. "But I'm okay with not being their safety net anymore." She scoffed. "Must be nice. Having the luxury to walk away." That wasn't luxury. That was survival. We stood there a moment longer, both of us carrying years we'd never understand about each other. Then I walked away. Not angry. Not shaking. Just done. Back in Boulder, I started writing a letter I never intended to send. To my parents. It began as a way to process, but soon it became something more honest than anything I'd said aloud to them. I told them everything. How betrayed I felt. How I had once viewed my support as love, and how they turned it into obligation. How I knew Daphne would always be their favorite, but I had still hoped there was room for me. I told them I wasn't bitter, I was just finished. I ended it by saying, "If you ever truly see me, not as your fallback, not as your mistake, but as your daughter, I'll be here. But I won't chase it anymore." I printed the letter, folded it, and tucked it into a drawer. I didn't mail it. Because I wasn't writing it for them. I started to feel more grounded in my choices. There was guilt, yes. And grief. But also clarity. There's something freeing about seeing a dynamic for what it truly is, and refusing to keep participating in your own erosion. A few months after that letter, I took a trip to Oregon. I rented a cabin alone, hiked along the Columbia River Gorge, and didn't bring my laptop. Just a journal, a few books, and my thoughts. One afternoon, sitting on a rock overlooking the water, I realized something simple but life-changing. I don't owe anyone access to me just because we share DNA. That thought was like breathing fresh air for the first time in years. Summer passed quietly, like a soft exhale. Boulder came alive with color, wildflowers blooming across the trails, students returning to campus, farmers markets buzzing with chatter and live music. I leaned into the calm, keeping a low profile, working shorter hours, drinking my morning coffee slowly instead of gulping it down on the way to a meeting. I didn't tell many people what had happened with my parents. Most of my friends only knew the surface of it, that I was going through some family stuff and needed space. Only Levi knew the whole truth, and even with him, it had taken me weeks to open up fully. One evening, while we sat on my balcony watching the sun set behind the Flatirons, I told him everything, from the years of quiet resentment to the Thanksgiving fallout, to the moment I blocked my mother's number after she texted me from a shelter. I waited for him to say it was harsh. That I had gone too far. Instead, he nodded slowly. "That's not a light decision to make," he said. But sometimes distance is the only way to survive people who say they love you while they hurt you. I think I fell a little in love with him right then, not because he fixed anything, but because he didn't try to. By late September, I had stopped checking in on anyone back in Spokane. Not even Maribel. It wasn't bitter. It was protection. I needed to live in a world where my parents didn't define me, where their choices didn't echo in every decision I made. It's amazing how much emotional noise disappears when you take yourself out of toxic systems. I started hearing myself again. My real self, the version of me who could read a book without glancing at my phone to see if someone needed money. Who could sit in a cafe and enjoy the clink of coffee cups without that dull, familiar guilt pulling at the back of my mind. I realized I'd been living like someone constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. Now, there were no shoes. Just silence. Peaceful, but strange. In early October, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, Spokane postmark. The handwriting was unmistakable, my father's. It wasn't long. 2 paragraphs on a piece of lined yellow paper. Mara, I don't know what to say that would make this better. We did wrong by you. We leaned too hard on you because we thought you'd always be there. We were ungrateful and unfair. I'm not asking for money, or even for you to forgive us. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Dad, I sat with that letter for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. But my hands trembled slightly as I folded it up and set it aside. Judith hadn't written. That didn't surprise me. But Howard, the man who never apologized, never admitted fault, had put pen to paper. Even if it was too late for restitution, it meant something. Still, I didn't write back. Forgiveness, I was learning, didn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes, it was simply letting go of the rope I'd been gripping for too long. I spent Thanksgiving that year alone by choice. I made roasted sweet potatoes, a small turkey breast, and cranberry sauce from scratch. Not because anyone was watching, but because I wanted to. I FaceTimed a few friends, sipped a glass of wine, and watched old black and white films under a blanket. No tension. No performance. No biting my tongue around a table just to keep the peace. Just me, in my space, being okay. And I really was. That December, snow came early. Boulder turned into a postcard, soft drifts, pine trees heavy with powder, twinkling lights strung across quiet streets. I bundled up and walked to my favorite bookstore, browsed the shelves, and picked out a memoir called What We Leave Behind. I didn't know anything about the author. I just liked the title. I read it in 2 sittings. It was about a woman who'd walked away from her deeply fractured family and rebuilt a life on her own terms. There was a line that stuck with me: sometimes healing doesn't look like going back. Sometimes it's just moving forward without dragging the wreckage behind you. I dog-eared the page and wrote it in my journal that night. Around the same time, Levi invited me to his family's Christmas gathering in Fort Collins. They're loud and chaotic, he warned. But good people. I hesitated. Part of me still flinched at the idea of being around someone else's family. Of walking into a room where expectations hung like fog. But I said yes. And you know what? They were loud. And messy. And asked too many questions. But they were kind. His mother offered me a second helping of green bean casserole without asking why I didn't have kids. His father sat beside me during dessert and told me about the time he got stuck in a snowstorm on Berthoud Pass and had to sleep in his truck. No one asked what I did for a living. No one made me feel like I had to earn my place at the table. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged somewhere without having to shrink myself to fit. January came again. A full year since the day I got that text from my mother: "We're in a shelter. Please help us." 12 months of silence. Of healing. Of learning to live without looking over my shoulder. One afternoon, I was leaving a small business conference in Denver when I saw the message. This time, it was an email. From Daphne. Subject: Please read. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but we really need your help. The assisted living program they were in got defunded. Mom and Dad are at risk of being evicted again. I can't do this alone. I know they made mistakes. But you're the only one who can help now. Please. Just talk to them. Or help them figure something out. Dad, for the first time in over a year, I didn't feel anger. I felt in control. And with that calm, I decided it was time to respond, not emotionally, not to argue, but to end the cycle once and for all. I wrote, Daphne, I gave over $140,000 across a decade. Not counting what I gave up emotionally, mentally, and in relationships to keep a roof over their heads. They secretly gave away part of that to you and justified it by saying I didn't have children. Then they gaslit me when I found out. I'm not heartless. I'm just finished. If you're asking me to carry their mistakes again, the answer is no. But I can help in a different way, by giving you the same resources I gave myself to become independent. Attached is a document listing programs, housing assistance numbers, and budget tools. Use them. Beyond that, I wish you well. But we are done. Mara. I never got a reply. But I did receive a receipt. And that was enough. 2 months later, in March, something unexpected happened. I was contacted by a woman named Clarice, an estate lawyer in Spokane. Your parents listed you as their financial proxy on some documents years ago, she explained. Since they defaulted on a few debts tied to your name, you're entitled to pursue reimbursement, or have your name formally removed. I almost laughed. The poetic justice of it all. After a short consultation, I filed for legal severance of financial responsibility, and a small claim to recover unpaid utilities and debts they'd incurred while I was still listed on their lease and accounts. It wasn't about the money. It was about the boundary. About putting something legal and final between us. They were served notices by the court. I never got a direct reaction. But word got back through Maribel, who, despite my distance, still trickled info my way now and then. They were shocked, she said. Hurt. But I think. Maybe they finally realized you weren't bluffing. Good. I wasn't. The court ruled in my favor. My name was cleared from all lingering accounts, and I received a reimbursement check for just under $7,000. I used it to book a 2-week trip to Portugal. Coastal towns, fresh seafood, no phone service. Just me, sunrises over the Atlantic, and zero family drama. 6 months later, my phone buzzed while I was sipping espresso in Lisbon. A message from Maribel. Just wanted to let you know. Your parents applied for public housing again. This time, they listed Daphne as their emergency contact. That was the final thread snipped. It felt like a curtain falling. Now I live differently. I say no without guilt. I answer calls on my terms. I give from overflow, not from depletion. Levi and I moved in together last fall. He's patient, grounded, and fiercely protective of my peace. We adopted an old cat named Louie, who sits on my keyboard during Zoom meetings and reminds me that life doesn't have to be hard to be meaningful. I still think about my parents. Sometimes when I pass a family in a park, or when I hear someone talk about their mother like she's their best friend. It's not envy, it's more like a quiet curiosity. What might have been? What never was? But I never think, what if I had just given more? Because I gave more than anyone should ever have to. And when I finally stopped giving? That's when I got my life back. The best revenge wasn't cruelty. It wasn't making them suffer. It was choosing myself, choosing peace, and refusing to be the ATM for people who didn't see me as a person. And if you're reading this and still stuck in that loop, trying to buy love from people who only notice you when they need something, I promise you, peace is better. Boundaries are love. And walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes, it's growing up. And that's the real legacy.